How much mana you can generate? Lots of mana. 3 mana source equal to that card's mana value. Big mana card, mana from the Urzatron lands generate tons of mana. Mana rocks gargantuan amount of mana. You have enough mana, 4 mana to cast, total of 7 mana. Fast mana cards, exactly enough mana, generating 6 mana. Monomorphos, an additional 1 to 2 mana, generate infinite mana. Overcosted Mana Tithe, basics and Mana Dork, tapping and adding mana. Pay mana and sacrifice 4 color mana base. The mana base, insane mana advantage, 4 more mana. For Tailstron's mana production, get ahead on mana. Painful Fetch Shock mana base, be efficient with your mana. Clean 2 color mana base, doesn't have enough mana. 5 mana to fairy, 3 mana to fairy, 7 mana by turn 3. Filter colorless mana to assemble 7 mana by turn 3. The most mana, generating more mana. Is a mana ability, color of mana, have a ton of mana, leaving you with no mana. Float a mana, 4 mana worth of land. High mana value plays. Keep up the mana for Cryptic, costs 2 mana to generate mana, an obscene amount of mana. Filter black into the rainbow mana, absurd mana output. For 0 mana, 5 mana to draw 3 cards of higher mana values. 3 swamps minimum for it to even generate mana. It generates a lot of mana, tons of mana, and nothing to do with it. An unfilled hole in its mana curve, painless rainbow mana base. Add mana for any creature, mana base precludes it. Attack big mana deck, flash in a lower mana value creature. Mana dorks, cost 1 and add mana, infinite green mana. You have enough mana to start it. If you have enough mana, 1 mana goblins, a sudden burst of mana, the mana adding slivers, gem hide, and mana weft. Different ways to build the mana base, infinite treasures, but not infinite mana. 7 mana creature, the 1 mana combo pieces, 1 mana changelings into Magda, 2 mana creatures, updating the mana base, and add upwards of 4 mana. Flash in a creature of a specific mana value, dismember, and the big mana card. Fast mana start of your own mana production, the 3 color Bant mana base, 3 card infinite mana combo, infinite colorless mana, 1 temple and 1 mana dork, infinite mana and token combo, link mana dorks prevent them from making mana. Eldrazi creatures with colored mana requirement, Magus fights big mana deck, 1 to 2 mana burn, fight control, and big mana. 8 copies of 1 mana dorks, superior mana advantage, flashback for 10 mana, huge mana advantage, 1 mana elves, a way to generate black mana, 14 mana with Nykthos. Untap Nykthos for mana, 14 mana from Nykthos, produce mana, tap itself for mana, generate a huge amount of mana, win the game with high mana value spells. How much mana you have, calculate how much mana you need, failing to get the mana engine online race combo in big mana decks. Very bad against low mana value deck, taps for white mana, playing green mana, higher combined mana value, disruption for big mana, create infinite green mana, tutor, and infinite mana sink. An infinite green mana, infinitely grow any mana dork, especially those that cost 1 mana to achieve infinite mana, infinite green mana, so you may be short on white mana, float mana in response for a measly 1 mana at instant speed. Use its mana efficiently, low mana value threats, a higher mana value deck, 0 mana creatures with a mana value of 7, Springleaf Drum if you need mana, get ahead on mana, be efficient with your mana. Doesn't have enough mana to cast multiple spells, focuses on mana denial. Besides its mana denial, relies on mana ramp, outpacing the opponent's mana production, better suited to abusing mana denial, can generate 4 mana on turn 2. Neither should you cut mana ramp, cut all even mana value cards to play Obosh, Monomorphos, permanents that tap for mana, generate a huge mana advantage, cards that cost 0 mana, generate infinite mana, including 0 mana, infinite mana combos, tons of mana with Kinnon, huge mana advantages, untapping mana elves, generate infinite mana, sacrifices itself to add 2 mana. The black mana for Cauldron, generate at least 4 mana, mana rituals, Monomorphos, enough mana and spells, you have more mana, cost 2 mana. The mana value, the reverse half is a higher mana value, 5 colors and mana hungry, generating excess mana, removal proof mana dork, attacks the opponent's mana, 1 arbiter requires 2 mana, 5 mana for ad nauseum, 6 mana to cast Angel's Grace, 3 card combo costing 4 mana, you'll need 6 to 7 mana, cast any 0 mana spell, spend your last mana on offer, packed even if you don't have the mana to pay for it, a gargantuan amount of mana. Mana Tithe, generate a bunch of mana, a floating mana in response, large amount of mana, Ragavan and mana dork, 1 mana sack outlet, some mana dorks to ramp, if you have no mana, 3 ambers for black mana, use the 3 mana, more early mana, and the mana to cast it. If you have enough mana, 3 mana mill cards, wipe out the opponent's mana. Blue mana for Uro. Mox Diamond helps you ramp mana to deny the opponent mana, especially 1 mana 1. Don't tap for mana. Beseiju 1 mana cheaper to channel, keeps the opponent off the mana needed to pay for days. Wants to keep the opponent's mana output low, more mana and more land drops, most costing 0 mana, 12 mana sources that produce blue, cycle Petal and Mox for mana, numerous 0 mana artifacts that you can float mana, grind away the opponent's mana base, overpowers the opponent's mana production. Big mana deck, full of spells that cost 0 mana, use the mana for Grape Shot, blue mana for offer, scale with more mana. Partially blue mana base, Mindslaver and 13 mana, a huge mana advantage. If you already have a ton of mana, 4 mana, once 4 mana is achieved, source of black mana in case your only mana is from the spirit guides all cards in your deck to have even mana values. Puts a creature with an even mana value, destroy all permanents with the same mana value. Big mana like Tron, reduce the mana base to straight green-white. Returns a creature with mana value 2 or less to stop the high mana value delve spells. Generate mana for Karn Wish targets and more mana. 5 mana white creatures, fast mana cards like Chrome Mox. Black 3 mana, add black mana equal to that creature's mana value. The mana it generates is based on mana value. Create a big burst of mana early. Range from 4 to 6 mana, 4 mana, 5 mana, 5 mana, black and red, 6 mana equipment, 4 to 6 mana modifications to the mana base, 3 mana black enchantment, black 3 mana 3/1, black 7 mana 5/1, black 6 mana 4/6, black 2 mana 2/1 unearth for 5 mana, 4 mana 2/4, 5 mana is somewhat steep, 5 mana instant, 1 mana more expensive, both red and blue mana, 3 mana removal spell, 3 mana enchantment, 3 mana enchantment, a legendary 4 mana artifact, add 3 mana, the bigger mana payoffs, prison and mana denial pieces, a sudden burst of mana, a 1 of 0 mana Stonecoil Serpent, 4 mana, mana morphos to generate 6 mana, enough mana to equip it immediately, red 4 mana enchantment, abilities that can act as mana sinks, and unlocking your mana for a turn, 4 mana blue and green enchantment, exactly 1 mana value more, 1 to 2 mana enchantment when you have plenty of mana, capable of producing black mana, such as Mana Confluence, green or colorless big mana ramp, a ton of mana, taps for mana, exponentially more mana. Add to Cloud Post's mana count, 3 mana, more mana from a second Cloud Post, infinite life, infinite mana, repeat as many times as you have mana, stay mana neutral, gain infinite mana. The most mana intensive infinite mana outlet, assemble infinite mana, save time with infinite mana, keep the opponent off mana. The lack of white mana doesn't have a mana ability, Ragavan to get ahead on mana. Cleaner 2-color mana base, adding mana early. If you have enough mana, mana ritual. If you don't have enough mana, Mox Amber for blue mana. Tap Amber for red mana, filter the red mana into blue. Additional mana with Mox Amber, mana dork, mana elves, infinite mana. Netting 1 white mana. Infinite white mana, infinite mana of every color. All cost 4 mana. 1 mana artifact, a 0 mana artifact, cost between 4 and 6 mana. Requires 6 mana, compensate for 2 of that mana. Generate 4 mana on turn 2. Combo with less mana, start the combo for 1 less mana, only 2 mana. Fast mana is 3 mana, high mana value spell. Exactly 4 mana, mana value is technically 12. Diverse mana requirement, volume of mana rituals, black or red mana. Lowest mana value, only 1 mana, a Naya colored mana base, 3 mana creature, pay 1 mana, net loss of 1 mana, adds a single red mana, offsetting the mana payment, 2 extra mana, generates 3 mana, and add mana. Double colored pips in their mana cost, mana ability, mana denial, get ahead on mana denial, boatloads of mana, sufficient mana. Mana dorks, mana intensive, mana morphos are mana positive, a 3 mana sorcery, soul lands that provide 2 mana, 3 mana white creature, advance on mana, assemble Tron mana, blue red mana base, get to 5 mana, the double mana from soul land, Eye of Ugin to tap for mana, a triple mana land, tap elves to produce mana, produces a ton of mana, generate a huge mana advantage, your opponent will have 2 open red mana, its mana get out of control.